Hello everybody and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to chop this massive Monstera siltepecana and I thought I'll record it and take you along. Alright, so what do we need for the chop and extend? Well, we need the moss pollen itself, but we also need a pot. I like to use these 20 centimeter see-through pots. I also get them from Bunnings and they're just really handy because you can spy on the roots as soon as the plant is growing. You'll need a garden stake, but I will just repurpose the one that is already on this pole over here, and you just need a few cable ties to hold it all together as well. So let's get started. Alrighty, so this pole was previously extended, so it's two poles stacked on top of each other. So where those two poles meet, I now actually just chopped the stems already so that the cuts can dry out a little bit before I start potting them up. So that's the first thing I do, and I do it a couple of hours before I start chopping it. Now the next step is to look at any roots that might have crawled down the pole, like over here. We want to keep as many roots as possible, but we're going to keep the top half. I'm going to pot up the top half and I'm going to keep extending the top. So I want to keep as many roots as possible to reduce the shock. So if there's any roots that are crawling on the outside of the moss pole, you can be very careful and slowly peel them off. So I'm just going to do that now and probably speed it up for you guys. Beautiful. Alright, so I saved as many roots as I can. Honestly, don't stress about it, you won't be able to save all of them. So I will eventually just cut through the pole as well if the roots don't come out by themselves. The more roots you can save, the better really, but don't stress about it too much. There should be enough root system within the pole itself to sustain the cutting regardless. So next step, I'm really just gonna cut the cable ties that I used last time to actually secure the poles together. I'm gonna cut them, and I'm gonna cut all of the cable ties that keep both poles attached to the garden stake in the back, and then I'll start wiggling the top to kind of see if it comes loose automatically. Alrighty, here we are. So we've got the two halves. You can see I was able to save a few roots of that top half. And then we've got the bottom over here. And the bottom half will reshoot as well. So it's not going to waste. You can either cut it up or you can just re-extend it, or you could give it to a friend. But I'm going to continue with the top cutting because that's the part that I want to re-extend to see mature further. What I want to do next is I want to remove as much moss as possible from the bottom part of the pole. That's the part that I'm going to pot up in a second. So I want to fill it with aerite mix instead. Now, when you remove that moss, it can be quite tricky to remove all of it. It's definitely much easier if you moisten the moss first, and don't get too caught up about if you can't get rid of all of the moss. There's a lot of roots in here and you don't want to destroy the root system either, but I'll just try and remove as much as I can, but I'm also not super fussed about it if I can't get all of it out. Alright, I think that will do. There's just a little bit more, there's a little bit of a gap at the bottom now that I can top up with aerite mix instead. Alrighty, so I've got a top of aerite mix over here. It's just really nice and chunky with a lot of bark, perlite, pumice, cocoa chips, a bit of charcoal, using a little bit of sand, cocoa peat and vermiculite as well. So I'll just carefully pop this upside down and I'll pop as much of the aerite mix as I can into the bottom of over here. So this looks something like this. I'll take the pot, flip the pot upside down. That's easy. And then I'll just top it up with aeroid mix. Alright, so we've got it all potted up. That's good enough, but I want to see it mature. So I'm going to re-extend this pole now. Alrighty, so I've got the garden stake, and the garden stake happens to be the perfect height of 180 centimeters, which is exactly the height of 2 of my poles. So I'll just pop the garden stake in there, and then I'll just take some cable ties to tie the base of the pole to the garden stake. I top up that little transition bit with a little bit more moss. And I'm just repurposing the moss that I took out of the bottom of this pole and just chuck it back on top. Take the moss extension and I'll just pop it on here, and I'll secure this using cable ties as well. Make sure the pole is dry when you do the extension, so it's as light as possible. That just makes your life much easier. Or get a friend to help you. As a very last step, I do want to connect the 2 poles themselves together as well. So what I'll do is I'll just find where the 2 poles meet, and I try and connect them using some cable ties too. They can be sometimes a little bit finicky. And a good tip is just to use a chopstick and kind of guide the cable tie to where you want it to be. Just for a little bit of extra support to make sure these 2 poles stay together. Alrighty, there you go. Got a nice lush pole, and it got plenty of room to now continue to grow up and mature and give me those nice large leaves. I hope you enjoyed, and feel free to subscribe and follow me on any other social media. It's just @SydneyPlantGuy. See ya!